Is there anybody here that wants to sit and let him cut your hair with a pair of scissors? You mentioned he wanted to be a barber. Would you be comfortable knowing that he would know that you were a lawyer or somebody that had a good job? Could you sit there and trust him that he wouldn't have anger? I can't imagine anybody wanting to allow him out. I just can't imagine it. I don't know what to say that would impress upon you the fear that I have and other people that knew him and people that didn't even know him. You know, he taught helter skelter. You know, just was he worshiped Manson. And Charles Manson, if he stayed where he should have stayed all of his life, and I hope Drabing stays where he's at now for the rest of his life.
And we are about to watch the parole hearing of a Charles Manson copycat. And we just listened to the daughter, the one who got away. This monster actually said after being convicted that his one was regret was that he was unable to kill her. Now, what's insane about this hearing is that even though he has murdered 3 people, and even though he has picked up additional felonies while locked up, he actually has a good time date just around the corner. This man is going to be walking the streets in just a few years, regardless of the result of this hearing. You can't make it up. But let's jump in and watch it, and I'll unpack it with the details at the end.
Good morning. Thank you. So I interviewed Mr. Drabing on Tuesday, August 13th via WebEx, our virtual platform from the Lawrence County Correction Center at 9 a.m. There were no other participants in the call except for our staff, and that was Allie, right? And then Mr. Draper was not represented by legal counsel or any other advocacy agency. He represented himself. When I asked him about legal counsel, he said he couldn't afford it and was unaware of any other potential legal options for himself. He was dressed appropriately, neatly coiffed, as they say, and during the interview, I found Mr. Drabing to be attentive, articulate, polite, respectful, open, and responsive. He openly discussed his personal history, his offenses, his incarceration time, and shared his life experiences. He responded politely to questions and open with his responses. He was invested in the process and responded to the best of his knowledge and ability. He did talk to me about how many years had gone by and trying to remember everything that occurred and having come here so many times. He told me quite honestly, he felt like I already knew his story before he began to speak. He was born in 1955, June, and he's currently 69 years old. He is serving a life sentence of 75 to 100 years for a triple murder of Lloyd and Phyllis Schneider and their teenage daughter, Terry, in Logan County, and then an additional 30 years for attempted murder for stabbing an inmate multiple times in prison. He has been incarcerated for 40 years and projected to be discharged, or actually discharged May 18th, 2032. That's the last information that I have. His health is relatively normal. He mentioned that he has arthritis and some other conditions. However, he's not taking any medication of any kind at this time. Upon entering the Department of Corrections in 1976, he did receive medication for mental illness, and he was hospitalized 3 times from 1977 to 1982, in which one was because of the attempted murder and attempted suicide. His last mental health assessment or evaluation, mental illness evaluation, was done in 2018, as requested then by the en banc and presented by Dr. T. James. He reported at that time that Mr. Drabing did not exhibit any mental health issues. He has been in contact with family members, his niece, Jessica, and who lives currently in Texas. And in the past, she offered him shelter and support for his release. It's unclear if she still provides that option. She wasn't there to share or give. He's had contact with other family members, but since 2018, no one else has come to visit him or called him or talked with him. He was raised by a single mother. He states that his childhood was a pretty normal upbringing, although he always felt that he was treated differently and often felt that that treatment was unfair. He continues to express a belief that he is treated differently and unfair, but he doesn't understand it. He's seen people who have done worse crimes than him, and he just doesn't get it why they are released and he's not. But it is what he is. That's what he said. But it is what it is. He maintains a relationship, as I said, with his mother, who's in a nursing home in Springfield. And of course, he's talked about if he were to be released, he would like to be able to be close to her so that he could see her. He said that he reads a great deal. And when I asked him what types of books and material, he said mostly history and biographies. He does keep up, he said, with current events. And his views about the 1% and unfair treatment, he said, of middle class and the poor. He said he does not have any ideology of getting rid of the rich. He says he has greater understanding of life after 48 years. He recognizes his incarceration because of his murderous acts and is remorseful. As remorseful, he said, remorseful is something that everybody wants it, but how do they see it? After 48 years of living this all the time, I am remorseful for what I've done and for what I did, not because I'm here, but because it was wrong. He said he was 21 years of age at the time of the murders, and he said, I was just crazy. In March of 1976, he had seen a TV documentary movie, Helter Skelter, and was fascinated by it. He then read the book 3 or 4 times, and the idea of the killings gelled with him in his mind as a way to elevate himself from what he considered at that time was his miserable life status. During his trial, the state's attorney said, although espousing a revolutionary philosophy of killing the rich, he never at any time in his life did a solitary thing that we have discovered to demonstrate his concern for the weak, the poor, and the downtrodden. On the contrary, he wanted all the finer things in life, a new car, nice clothes, consumer goods, but did not want to work for them. He quit several good jobs and drew unemployment. During the interview, he did reinforce this statement, and he added that while his political views do not support the wealthy and that he is dissatisfied with the distribution of financial benefits given to the 1%, he is not murderous or think that you need to go out there and kill people who have wealth. The statement of facts of what happened was on August 19th, 1976. Mr. Drabing carried out a portion of his premeditated plan to murder the entire Snyder family in their home. Mr. Snyder was 44 and lived with his wife, Phyllis, who was age 45. They had 3 daughters, Nancy, 21, a student at the University of Illinois, Terry, 17, a high school senior, and Cheryl, 15, a high school sophomore. They were a relatively wealthy family who lived in a modern one-story home at the top of a hill facing the town of Lincoln. They ran 400-acre hog farm, and were active in their community and their daughter's extracurricular activities. After being kicked out of the home from some of his friends from a party being held at the victim's home, several days before he committed the murderous act, he had gone there with his friends, and I guess things got out of hand, he said, and they were kicked out, and that made him angry. On August 19th, he went into the home armed with a rope, a .22 caliber handgun, a hunting knife, and a 6-inch blade. When he forced his way in at gunpoint, the only people in the home were Snyder's teenage daughter, Terry, and her boyfriend, Jeffrey Richardson. He bound the two when Terry's parents, Lloyd and Phyllis, returned to their home with their second daughter, Cheryl. He viciously attacked Lloyd and Phyllis, as well as Terry. They fought for their lives, but Mr. Drabing was able to kill them by using his large knife, stabbing them multiple times, over 90 in total, and as deep as 6 inches. While this slaughter was occurring, Cheryl and Jeffrey were able to escape and contact the authorities. It should be noted that he planned to kill 5 people that evening. He admits to the murders but claimed insanity at the time of the trial. The defense was rejected, and his motion for murder, according to him, is related to his disdain for family because of their wealth and the way that he was treated when he was there for the party a few nights before. He additionally said that at the time that he was harboring anger for being kicked out of the house. His plan was to murder each person in the house in a different way. For example, one was to murder in a swimming pool, and he planned to put the one on the pool table and skin them alive. This is supported by his binding of the 2 teenagers before he began killing. Medical records would indicate that all 3 of the victims died as a result of hemorrhaging due to the multiple stab wounds. The victims sustained multiple wounds, approximately 10 stabs each, with wounds again being 6 inches deep. On February 10th of 1981, while housed in Menard, he was charged with ultimately convicted of attempted murder for stabbing a fellow inmate 9 times while in prison. During the interview, because other times he's been here at least 20 times since his incarceration in 1977 to ask for clemency. Excuse me. During the interview, I asked him, so what were you doing before all of this, moments before? Sometimes we do things impulsively. He was actually planning his criminal act, and he stated that he'd been using marijuana to self-medicate, that he was doing LSD. He didn't understand what was going on around him or with him, but he was terribly depressed, so he was taking all these things. It was so bad that his mother got him help in a clinic. There was supposed to be a psychiatrist to evaluate him, and this happened several weeks before he murdered the family. He was told that the doctor was out of town. In 1989, he was issued a sexual misconduct ticket, which resulted in 2 months of B grade. And in 2017, he was found guilty after a fight, which was reduced to individual receiving just a 1 month C grade. And he's not had any other tickets or incidents. It does say that he was in a psychiatric reunit in 1978, again in 1981, which he then tried to cut his wrist, and then, of course, for the stabbings. Then again, in 1982, he had a 98-day psych. In 1983, they put him in a psych unit because he witnessed a murder. He's been in Lawrenceville Corrections since 2016. There was the last assessment, as I mentioned earlier, was done in November of 2021. He completed an ORS reentry tool. The results indicated low risk to reoffend. No recommendations were made at that time of the assessment. His accomplishments in the 48 years, considering his time, as an example, is that he was a laundry repair person. He's worked as a barber, a groundskeeper, vocational school carpenter. He's worked in industry, shipping, Menards. He's worked for Lifer Groups, a charity group, Catholic Parish Group as a clerk, Lifer Group as a charity group, and Catholic Parish Group. He hasn't worked since COVID in Lawrenceville. Rehabilitation with his sentence, of course, he was limited in his participation, but made efforts to improve his cognitive attitude and behaviors and skills. He did participate in Lifestyles Redirection Coping Skills, Reentry Summit in 2015, Life Skills, Track 1, Critical Thinking in 2016, and Inner Circle, and Thinking for a Change, which wasn't the regular program, but he went out and he got the information with the program. His last en banc was in 2021 and was given a 3-year set. His reentry plan, the situation is this. Years ago, his wife would visit, his mother would visit, his cousin's niece, everybody, and through the years, no one visits anymore. He has no interaction with anyone in the family other than communicating occasionally with his mother. In 2021, it was reported he had a good support system, particularly with his niece. He spoke with her by phone at least once a week, and that isn't the case any longer. She has a family now in Texas, and he is no longer in contact with his wife or any other family members. He does not have an active MSR site and states that he's willing to go to any transition housing facility selected by the Department of Corrections. It's just that through transition, he hopes to move home, which would be close to his mother. Over the years, the recommendations from the Department of Corrections have improved. They've continued to show his improvement and show him as less of a risk. And they do recommend that he continues his mental health counseling, which he's continued through the years. There was a letter of opposition from Associate Judge William, and no other letters that were added to the file since then. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Do any of the board members have any questions for Ms. Goff?
I have no questions, but I'm here to provide the protest letters of communications that we would have to do in closed session at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll go you make a motion to go in executive session,
I make,
and seconded by Mr. Heaton. Those in favor respond by voting aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're going to go in executive session, and when we're done, we'll call you back in for the next case, or the rest of this case.
is there anyone here to speak in opposition? All right, but should we hear them? Or?
Huh?
Should we hear the opposition first?
Well, we've already had a motion.
Okay, let's
to
go
in
ahead. Yep.
executive session. So, and it's been granted. So thank you for appearing. You realize these are public hearings, and by testifying, your names will be known if he ever does get out. His projected release date right now is November 18th of 31. So it's about 6 years, regardless of whatever the board does, or 7 years, I should say. I think he is now currently 69. 69. So after that point, he'll be on parole for 3 years if he's still with us. I'm just letting you know that before you are sworn in. All right? Okay. Amy, do you want to swear him in?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, you will give in this hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Okay. They need to turn on their microphone and just go ahead and tell us what you want to hear us to hear.
Well, I guess first I should tell you who I am. I'm Cheryl Snyder, daughter of Lloyd and Phyllis Snyder. And Terry was my sister. I did notice a few things that Drabing had said that was different from some of the things he had said earlier. And some of the things that he said, I think if you look into the case, you'll definitely see differences there. He claims he was an outcast, but yet he was well enough liked that he was supposed to be in somebody's wedding later in the fall. That's not really an outcast. If you're an outcast, you're not asked to be in somebody's wedding. He couldn't even behave himself when he was in prison. He's got numerous tickets. I think he's maybe realized that he has to behave or no point in coming to these hearings. I think he's smart enough to know those things and will lie to get released. He wants to come back and live in Springfield. I still live in the area. My family still lives in the area. He wants to be close to his mother. I'd like to be close to my family too, my mother and my father and my sister. But that was taken away from me many years ago. I'll never be close to them again. Sorry. I fear for my life. I think the day that I had to testify against him when I was 15, I put a target on my back if he'd ever be released. I was hopeful that he would get life, but unfortunately at the time that was not an option. He has had at different times been diagnosed with psychosis, or so we were told. So I'm not sure if that is a current diagnosis, but I would find that interesting. I don't think there's one person in Logan County that wants him to come home, to come out and live amongst law-abiding citizens. I don't think the police officers want to deal with him. The courts don't want to deal with him. And just the fear everybody would have, knowing that he is there and would have the opportunity to finish what he wanted to do. My family was just basically a trial because we were remote, and he knew that he could get practice doing it. And I fear for my life, my family's life, my kids' life, and their children. There's too many people. He's already ruined my life. I don't want him to have the opportunity to ruin it again. And it's not only the physical fear, it's not just physical, it's the mental, issues that I have to deal with, knowing that he is still alive and he still has the potential to come finish his job. He thought this out. He knew what he was doing. He should there's just no way that you could possibly say yes. Is there anybody here that wants to sit and let him cut your hair with a pair of scissors? You mentioned he wanted to be a barber. Would you be comfortable knowing that he would know that you were a lawyer or somebody that had a good job? Could you sit there and trust him that he wouldn't have anger? I can't imagine anybody wanting to allow him out. I just can't imagine it. I don't know what to say that would impress upon you the fear that I have, and other people that knew him and people that didn't even know him. He taught helter skelter, just was he worshiped Manson, and Charles Manson, he stayed where he should have stayed all of his life, and I hope Drabing stays where he's at now for the rest of his life. Want to say anything?
I think you spoke very well. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a.
No, I think you did an
lawyer
excellent
to
job.
Speak for me.
Would she like to speak?
Sure. For some of the stuff that Drabing said, it's not true. He was a year ahead of me in high school. He was friends with my current boyfriend that we've been going out for 29 years. He does not want me to attend these things. He thinks it puts a target on his back and my back. His immediate family and his grandparents were both on Mike Drabing's list, even though they were friends. I was supposed to walk down the aisle with him in September at one of my friends' weddings. They live in another town, and they're still fearful of him. They don't want him out, and that was one of his best friends. Another girl I just worked on for our 50th class reunion, her husband was another one of his best friends, and she just told me at this last reunion thing that Mike had planned to do this like the week before or something like that. And they didn't know this till afterwards, because neither one of these two guys knew anything about what he was going to do, or they wouldn't have let him. But her husband went and got him, and they went and did something fun or something, and postponed the killings for a week. They found that after the murder. He was writing to a couple of them after he got in prison. he wasn't an outcast. He was with everybody else. I mean, I can't say we were the most popular kids in the school, but we weren't downtrodden either. And he was just in there with everybody else. I was at a party at my house. I lived out in the country too, but we weren't wealthy. I've seen him carried out of a house when they're playing poker. He just would just get into rages, and it took like 5 guys to get him carried out of the house so he didn't destroy the house. And this was when I was in high school. 1 at each leg, 1 at each arm, and 1 at his head. He was working at the time of the murders. He was working for Jim Hostetter as a house painter, and they used to come into the restaurant, little tiny diner that I worked at, for breakfast. He wasn't high 24 hours a day. One of our friends considered him like a big brother, and she was popular. She was a cheerleader, and he wasn't outcast. He wasn't picked on that I knew of by anybody. And I don't know anybody that wants him out either, even the people that were his good friends. I don't know what else to say. Well, one of these parole hearings that we went to too, they had said that he was diagnosed as a sociopath, and that's scary. He's an intelligent person. He's not stupid. So he's trying to say and do everything he can to get released. And if he's just in Springfield, he's 30 miles from us. We're sitting ducks.
Thank you. I think you both did a very excellent job in letting us know how you feel about the release of Mr. Drabing. Does any of the board members have any questions for either of these witnesses? Okay. You can stay. We'll vote on this today in a few minutes. Hearing no questions, Ms. Goff, do you have any motion you would like to present?
Oh, sorry. I will make a couple comments if I
Yes.
could beforehand. Just 2 things. One, I think his lack of insight into the harm of his offense and stating simply he doesn't understand why, other people with worse things have gotten out when he's had both the triple homicide, the 2 other intended homicides, as well as the attempted murder within the institution. I will also note that when IDOC had assessed him, on the formal risk assessment, he was noted to be low risk, that the counselor did take a moment to indicate that he could benefit from various minimum security options within the department before having the opportunity to return to society. And that it is recommended that he continues with the resources within IDOC. And I wanted that for the board as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Ms. Goff, any other questions from any board members? Ms. Goff.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
So sorry. And one other thing, there was indication in the file simply pointing out that he served approximately 15 years per life that he's taken. And I thought that was striking as well, given the statutory minimum for a homicide of 20 years and the various factors of aggravation. That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Not a problem. I don't want to belabor my recommendation. I do have something I would like to share and say, and that is an observation, not just in this case, but in all our cases. When we look at this and consider returning a citizen to the community and the community really being ready for them to be there, but them, in my mind, I don't know how many of you have ever watched the movies regarding Orson, during Wells taking his travel back in time and watching how the world changes. And I imagine living in prison for 30 plus years, that's what's happening while you're sitting there, as the world is changing. There's no way you're prepared to go home. We watch that time and again. So I just wanted to say that I wanted to make that statement. It is, I seriously think that the victims and the families and their fears with regards to, I want to acknowledge that it's real. It's not imagined, it's real. And that I think that Mr. Drabing's poor reentry plan, he doesn't have a plan. So the thought about him being released in 2031 or 2032 is he doesn't have a plan to really a stable plan for going home. And so I think it's in the best interest of the families of the community of Illinois that we not grant him his request.
So is your motion to deny?
My notion is to deny. I'm sorry, Mr. Dupuy. Yes.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded by Mr. Boland. Amy, please call the roll.
Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Delgado,
Yes.
Ms. Globker,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Ms. Taronis,
Yes.
Mr. Tupy.
Yes. By a motion of 10-0, the motion to grant parole is denied. Do you have a second motion?
On the set.
Yes, I do. I know that it's my understanding we can't do 5, but I would recommend that the maximum, which would be what, 3 years set?
You can
I
do
believe
5,
it's 5.
but he's going to get out in 7 years, so they're going to have to come back at least one more
So
time.
I'd say 3 years.
5
5
the
is fine?
maximum if you'd like it.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I think I was corrected one time and told I couldn't do 5, so that's what my headset is right now.
All right, motion for 5. Any second? By Mr. Delgado. Motion's been made and seconded to grant a 5-year set. Those in favor of the motion respond by voting aye. Call the
Aye.
roll. Amy.
Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Delgado,
Yes.
Ms. Globker,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
No.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Ms. Taronis,
Yes.
Mr. Tupy.
Yes. By a vote of 9-1, the motion passes. He's going to get a 5-year set. He does get out in 2031. Regardless of what you do, we have to have one more parole hearing in 5 years. But you can take that back to your families, all right?
Can you even imagine that one of the 10 parole board members said, no. He should have another opportunity in 3 years, not 5. Not 5. Let's put the victim through this 2 years earlier than we have to. Can you? I would love to sit down and say, can you tell me why? Like, is there an even if you want to say that you're ideological, where I want to give him a chance to get. What do you? Anyways, there's so much more to talk about. To talk about that is actually pretty dumb. Here, he has a good time date. How is that possible? How is it possible that a man who murders 3 in a family, he intended to murder 5, and he had an attempted murder while in prison, has a good time date in 7 years? It's insane. He's born in 1955. He's young. His good time is 2031. Even if he somehow messes up, his full term is 2034. This guy is dangerous. I'm going to go through some information with you. They say his friends say that he was killing kittens when he was like 8 years old. I mean, he checks every box of who he is. There's no one who's still in his life. You know, all serial killers, they get married. We know that. I mean, we see, but even she left him. His niece, his mother barely talks to him. They said every once in a while. I wonder what that even means. What do you think is going to happen when he gets out? You know, one thing I appreciated is the parole board. They said the words to the victim's family. Their fear is not imagined. It's real. Yeah, it's real. It is very real. This guy's gonna get out. Now we don't have, we don't see his but he's a beast of a man. I don't know what he looks like today per se, but look how big he is here, even in this picture. And they say in the different articles that he was just. Let me show you the cat thing. I don't know if I was just sharing that picture with you or not. Thank you, Sir Richard, for the articles. Lincoln, Illinois. Okay, the younger brother of accused killer Michael Edward. So this is from the younger brother. Testified Saturday that his brother used to torture cats and had grown moody and irritable in the last year. It seemed like he was changing, staying at home, becoming more moody and irritable. He would be sitting in his chair alone in his room doing nothing. Michael is accused of stabbing and slashing to death 3 members of a wealthy Logan County family. He had been motivated by the mass murders committed by Charles Manson family in California and hoped other movements in the country were ready to take over where he left off, killing rich people. Ludin and Drabing was a schizophrenic who is legally not responsible for his action. Said that he was okay. He is, though. Drabing apparently knew his victims only slightly. Testimonies indicated he accused of invading the Lloyd Schneider home and killing Schneider 44, his wife 45, and their daughter Terry 7. He apparently chose them only because they seemed wealthy and lived in a remote spot. Michael played cards with his brother and some of his friends in the afternoon before the killing and did nothing unusual, Mark testified. But his brother had always been a very good card player, he said, and for the past year, winning didn't really seem to matter much as it used to. When Drabing was about 12, he would sick his dog on kittens, and several times he took cats by the tail and slammed them into something. I mean, but don't worry, the DOC knows best. The DOC knows that he's a low risk score. Of course, he's not a risk to hurt anybody. Shame on us with that, without our PhDs. What do we know? We don't know more than the algorithm. In the only other testimony Saturday, psychologist Donna Schneig Springfield said he had given Drabing a Warsaw test, an ink blot test on December 4th, and had found him to be psychotic, who lacked the ability to integrate himself into society. What was the word they used? Did they use the word psychopath or sociopath? Other tests administered, he said, indicated that the college dropout had only slightly above average intelligence. State's attorney, only slightly above average intelligence. You hear how they word that? He has above average intelligence. And to try to get him, they say he's only slightly very smart. Idiots. They're such morons. Pointing out, however, that Drabing had scored in the upper 10% of all high school students on intelligence tests. They're such clowns, these attorneys. Now, let me here it is. Man is found guilty of killing 3 Illinois farm family. Michael Drabing, Lincoln House painter, sat smiling yesterday at circuit court. Judge found him guilty of the murders of a wealthy Lincoln farmer, his wife, and their daughter. Judge James Heipel ruled that Drabing was sane at the time of the killing. 5 or 6 persons in the courtroom applauded when the verdict was read. Drabing leaned back in his chair, grinning, and was still smiling as deputies led him from the courtroom. 21 years old, who pled not guilty by reason of insanity, was convicted on August 19th stabbing of Lloyd Schneider for in the verdict shortly after the argument had been presented. This defendant, in the popular conception, is crazy because he did what most of us would label as insane, Heipel said. Then he added, I agree with the conclusion on psychiatrists who testified for the prosecution that the defendant did understand the criminality of his action. Drabing testified that Tuesday that his only regret was that he testified Tuesday that his only regret was that 2 intended victims, Jeffrey Richardson, an acquaintance of Terry's, and his second daughter, who we heard bravely stand up and, mind you, even mention, and I don't get an attorney. She gets nothing. The DA doesn't show up. Clowns. Really. Unreal. How does he have parole eligibility? And listen to this: with his attempted murder in prison, they sentenced him for that, but they had it run concurrent with his current sentence, which they could have just made sure he would never get out by running it consecutively, but no, no, why would they do that? So, second daughter Cheryl, 16, escaped while he was killing the others at the farmhouse. She was there and she escaped. When I got back, this is now him talking, the monster. When I got back to my car, I started crying. He said, I felt like I hadn't succeeded like I should have. The prosecution contended that Drabing had been influenced by the book and movie Helter Skelter, based on murders committed in California by Charles Manson and his family of followers. Heupel ruled that such influence did not constitute insanity. Drabing testified he knew that he was doing what he was doing at the time of the killings and that it was right. He also testified that he planned to kill the good politicians in Springfield, Illinois. After the Schneider killing, so bad politicians would cause the downfall of the country. Wow. Okay. Lucky for you, these politicians are the one that are giving you parole eligibility. Psychiatrist Dr. Philip Bornstein testified for the defense Monday that Drabing was a schizo who should be confined in a mental hospital, quoting Drabing saying, "Rich people should die for what they're taking from everybody. This is justice." So this is the guy that he attempted to kill in prison. Also a serial killer. Now here's classic Illinois for you. This man was a convicted murderer, let out of prison after serving just 10 years. You heard me right. He served 10 years for murdering someone. So for 1972 to 1973, following his parole, he was on parole in 1963 for killing an accomplice. He then went and murdered 3 women over a 10-year period. I guess that's 3 that they know of. On March 25th, 1963, William visited his barber shop, asking him to accompany him for another robbery. They're talking about the first murder. Then they go into so he was a serial killer. Now this is where it comes in. That now in 1981, the prison assault. On February 10th, 1981, while serving his sentence, Summer was walking on a sidewalk in the central area when he was suddenly ambushed by another inmate. Triple murderer Michael Drabing. So triple murderer versus serial killer, who then stabbed him with the shank. Summer's injury required 17 stitches and he was hospitalized for a week, but he would later fully recover from the attack. While a full explanation behind the attack was never given, Drabing, and I know I'm saying Drabing, I just heard it, I'm sorry, that if it was in self-defense, he admitted to being the instigator, but claimed that Summer was in possession of the shank. His claims were not believed, and Drabing was given an additional 30-year sentence for attempted murder and armed violence to be served concurrently with his already existing sentences. I mean, why? Why? You had your chance. If you could have argued that, there's legislation, somehow he only gets to serve 15 years for each murder, he gets a 45-year, he gets a good time date. What is going on? I know, Griggs, maybe you're watching this from Illinois. He's a law nerd. Can you tell us what's going on with this legislation? Because Sir Richard is ill right now, and he's not doing good. So if y'all can say a prayer, light a candle, give a thought. He says, please just give the thoughts and prayers for Lorraine, his wife, who is struggling with Sir Richard being out of it. But he's pretty much, he's bedridden, having difficult seeing. He can't really sit up for more than 15 minutes at a time, which is an improvement from where he's been in the past week. But so I'm out of, I can't just read. Normally I'll just reach out and say, what's going on here? But also another thing, if you notice on the top left corner of this hearing, it said that the hearing date was 6/13/2024. That's wrong. They're just, whoever set this recording up was wrong. This hearing took place October 30th or 31st, 2024, just as an FYI. And how long have we been doing this? 11 minutes. So we have time for one more hearing. Now we're going to do another serial killer Illinois parole hearing. About 10% of you have already seen it, but most of you haven't. So that's why I think it's worth playing it again here. And feel free to just not watch it if you've seen it already. And with that, let's jump in. Now we are going to watch the parole hearing of a full-fledged serial killer, maybe one of the most unknown but notorious serial killers. I never heard of him until now. He was locked up, given 500 years in prison in 1971. Yes, this is an Illinois parole hearing. Now, he was serving in the army in Germany, and they think that he did many, many more murders than the 4 to 12 victims that they have listed here. You'll hear about that in the parole hearing, and I'll share more of it with you in the unpacking. Can you imagine a serial killer having the rights to have a parole hearing? I don't know. Make it make sense, but what do we know? With that, let's jump in.
That's your call. Thank you. Good morning, board members. Good morning again, folks. Now we're back in session here for en banc hearing of today on parole requests of Mark Allen Smith, C number 10587. Mark Allen Smith was interviewed on July 3rd of 24 via video teleconference. Mr. Smith was coherent, was focused. However, it was a very short interview. Mr. Smith was quick to inform me that he was not interested in parole. Mr. Smith was clear on the amount of time that he must serve for his crimes and indicated to me he will leave when Arkansas DOC comes to get him to serve another conviction that is in the state. He did indicate to me that he was talking to me only because of the fact that he was having a better day. I was impressed, actually, because he had refused to do other interviews, I understand. Mr. Smith is approximately 75 years old. Mr. Smith was diagnosed with sociopathic behavior, as Mr. Tupius pointed out in the previous talk. Statement of facts. Mr. Smith had 3 individual cases, in fact. Mr. Smith is convicted and serving his time for the abduction of Miss Jean Bianchi, whom was 27 years old at the time. Smith sexually assaulted and stabbed her 17 times. He then threw her body off a bridge. Smith noticed that she was still alive, and he returned to her according to the file documents. He held her head underwater, but not before he put sand down her throat. These offenses occurred on or around January 27th, 1970. The second offense, Mr. Smith and the second victim, Janice Boilyard, worked at the same chemical company where Mr. Smith saw Miss Boilyard going downstairs to the basement and followed her. In an unwanted attempt to kiss her, Boilyard resisted, and when she did, Smith grabbed her by the throat and began choking and strangling her until she passed out. Smith then raped her. Smith then tied her pantyhose around her neck, strangling her to death. This offense, on or around February 27th, 1970, a month later. On the third offense, the murder on May 27th, 1970, just 3 months after the other murders, Smith was convicted for the rape and strangulation death of Miss Jean Lingenfeiter. She was just 17, a McHenry High School student. Smith is convicted for rape and murder by strangulation and dumped her body into a lake. Smith received 199 to 200 years. It is noted that all these sentences run consecutively. Furthermore, Smith was also convicted by Randolph County for attempted escape and received another 6 to 18 years again to run consecutively. Statement of Mr. Smith was, as he advised me, and I've indicated to you all, as the institutional staff, that he's not seeking parole. Mr. Smith stated that he will leave when the Department of Corrections at Arkansas comes to pick him up. And he reminded me, don't you understand how many years I have here? Criminal history, Mark Allen Smith, with the convictions being served for that in addition to the attempted escape at Pontiac, 6 to 18 years information in the file, also indicates that Mr. Smith admits to raping and murders of more than 3 women in Germany and possibly other places while stationed in Germany, which should be Interpol in terms of the state of Illinois' responsibility to pass this knowledge forward. Institutional adjustments. Mr. Smith is a medium security, moderate escape risk offender. Smith does have an A grade for lack of IDR since since 5/1990. His most serious recent was striking another inmate, 2/23/08. Family relations, Mark Smith, according to the institution, has not received or had any visits from family or friends since 2019. Smith indicates that he has no outside contacts as they've all passed away. Reentry plans do not exist. Mr. Smith has not submitted a petition for consideration and was not interested in going any further. The interview was actually very short in comparison. Actually, it was long compared to the other ones, but it was short. Opposed to relief, State's Attorney of Cook, McHenry in two cases in Randolph County for attempted escape. Many family members, friends, and other citizens, as Mr. Tupi in place of Mr. Bolin, who did the actual interviews, have indicated, and it's in the file and record, are opposed to Mr. Smith's release. Rationale, considering the heinous nature of the offenses. Well, should we continue? Yes, and then we'll go. Well, rationale, considering the heinous nature of these offenses by Mark Allen Smith, that his release would deprecate the seriousness of the offenses in law. Furthermore, the interests of public safety would definitely be at risk. Therefore, it's my recommendation to deny the parole of Mark Allen Smith, and I'm requesting of all the members of a 5-year set.
Ms. Bartel, do you want to come up?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
If Mr. Smith be paroled, the Attorney General's office is requesting a 90-day stay for an evaluation under the Sexually Violent Persons Commitment Act. Thank you.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Smith is one of our few people that I consider a serial murderer, and I'm going to support that motion. Seeing no further requests for discussion, Ally, call the roll.
Mr. Delgado,
Yes.
Mr. Coates,
Yes.
Ms. Globoker, Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Ms. Taronis, Ms. Tyson,
Yes.
Mr. Tupy.
Yes. Do you have a second motion, Mr. Delgado, for a set?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the second motion would be a 5-year set.
By Mr. Heaton. Those in favor of the motion, Ally, call the roll.
Mr. Delgado,
Aye.
Mr. Coates,
Yes.
Ms. Globoker,
Yes.
Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Ms. Taronis,
Yes.
Ms. Tyson,
Yes.
Mr. Tupy.
Yes. Both motions pass. You'll be sent around for signature requirements, but thank you, Mr. Delgado. Bye. Ally, do you want to call the next case? He's been killing women for years. Some we probably don't even know about. There's probably a lot we don't know about. Yeah, I was reading this Legally Sane where he put stars up on his visor so he knew how many he killed.
Can you even imagine that he has an opportunity for parole? And I'm going to read to you some of these articles. I was going through them. Richard sent 50 of them, and I'm only going to go through I'm going to try to keep this down to 10 minutes so we can go to the other hearings. But a brief synopsis on this is that his first known crime, believe it or not, is when he was 8 years old and he stabbed his playmate 20 times with a penknife who was 6 years old. Yeah. Also, when he was, I think, 7 years old, he tried to strangle his fellow classmate. So this person who's been a monster has been a monster for a long time. And they think that he's been, as we heard in the hot mic over there, that, he has a much longer list of murders. This is like really one of the biggest serial killers that so few of us know about. But there was a book that he was referring to in that hot mic called Legally Sane. Legally Sane. If you type it in Google, it shows up on Amazon. You can buy it used for $4,995. I am not joking. That is what it is selling for on Amazon. So apparently there are collectors that there are here. I'll show it to you. I don't think I have any no, I don't know. There's like sharing a screen is just, it's not worth it. But it's written in 1972. And yeah, $4,995 if you want to buy that book written about this serial killer. So serial killer wants to be forgotten. This is, I'm not sure when this was written. I think something like maybe 30 years ago or so. But let's see. Except in his own hometown, Mark has just achieved his goal of becoming a forgotten man. Time and nearly 20 years of life behind bars have robbed him of his boyish good looks, although he has retained his burly physique, his sandy beard, and his shoulder-length hair make him look all of his 41 years. This was like 30 years ago about. So if it weren't for the fact that he dressed in denim prison garb and was sitting in a drab yellow interview room on Pontiac Correction Center, he could have been mistaken for a construction worker. Even with the prison grounds, he attempted to maintain a low profile, and when he discussed the 7 murders of young women he admitted to committing more than 20 years ago, they seemed like remote events that happened to someone else in another lifetime. I don't think I understood what I did then, Smith admitted earlier this month during his first interview in 18 years. I didn't have a sense of self-worth. I didn't like myself much, less anyone else. The state's forgotten serial killer, confessed to sexually assaulting and murdering 2 women in then largely rural Henry County, another in suburban Des Plaines, 1 in Mountain Home Arc, 3 in West Germany while he was stationed there in the U.S. Army. Since then, he has been questioned about murders in Vietnam, Korea, 5 other states, Washington, D.C. At one point, he was questioned for the 1966 murder of a 21-year-old Valerie Percy, daughter from former Illinois Senator Charles Percy. Prosecutors believe his victims may have exceeded 20 in the number, but because the crimes covered a 2-year period and occurred over a large geographic area, he did not receive the notoriety of such infamous killers as Charles Manson, Richard Speck, and John Wayne Gacy. The sexual assault and strangulation of 7-year-old Jean, am I pronounced this right? Is it Jean Ann Lingfelder? Is it Jean? In 1970, stunned the small northwest suburb of McHenry, but received surprisingly little attention in the Chicago news media, even after the details of the earlier murders dribbled out. A psychologist who examined Smith testified he is far more dangerous than Manson or Speck. He could talk to you about murdering people just like it was going to a grocery store, said McHenry County state's attorney, who helped prosecute Smith in 1971 and is now trying to keep him from being paroled. Can you imagine, by the way, he had his first parole opportunity 3 years after getting convicted for this, after getting a 500-year sentence, and he had that parole every 3 years. He has had something like, if I have to remember correctly, over 20 parole opportunities or 15 parole opportunities. Why? And what I've been reading, victims were writing in letters and showing up in every 3 years. These are lawmakers that allow this to happen, and we would all just sit back and say, we don't understand. It's like, what, you can't get together and write the legislation and say someone who does something like this cannot get parole opportunity every 3 years. And even now, they allow him an opportunity after 5 to get another rehearing, which is just like the brains of our. But we don't understand. We're just sheeple. What do we do, right? We don't understand. We don't. Clearly, we don't. I mean, come on. How could we? We're not in government. So when Smith faces a prisoner review board on July 25th, the families of Langfelter and another of his victims plan to attend the hearing to present petition containing 4,000 signatures and protesting letters opposed to reducing his 400-year sentence. Although Smith says he can successfully re-enter into society, he isn't asking to be paroled in Illinois. He realizes his chances are nil here, and besides, he'd rather go to Arkansas where prisons are less crowded. He awaits a life sentence there for 1969 sexual assault and murder of another housewife. Well, I guess now he's comfortable where he is because he doesn't seem to want to go there. Or again, this could all be word manipulation and jokes and tricks with these guys, what they say, right? He claims he has changed. The "I just didn't care" attitude is gone, he says. And today he's an avid artist selling his oil paintings to prison officers. Hey, if that book goes for $5,000, imagine what those paintings go for. He's working on his 3rd college degree, and he's even taken another name, Remington Steele, which he said has no connection to the fictional television detective. I realized somewhere along the way that I don't like violent people, and that I don't like the kind of people who do what I did. Okay, bro. But then I have to justify what I did, and I can't. I'm aware that what I've done is serious, he said. But if they're looking for a monster locked up here, they're not going to find one. No, you're a monster. Yeah, you're the definition of monster. That is not the opinion shared by McHenry area residents old enough to remember May 12, 1970. Where am I in the time? I'm at 8 minutes. I'll do 2 more minutes, so I have to hurry through this. I don't know how many of you like hearing me doing these unpackings, so I know. I'm just saying, like, it's hard. It's hard to know how much to read when the whole parole hearing is 9 minutes. You know, how much of it am I going to talk already? May 27, 1970, when the body of Liffinger, an honors student at the local high school, was found a few days short of her graduation, a few days after the triple dating with Smith at the school platform, she had been strangled with her bra, police said. 4 months prior to that day, the body of Jean, a 27-year-old McHenry housewife with 2 children, was found in a creek 4 miles south. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. Police broke both cases after Smith, who was described as an athletic, polite, intelligent, and dashingly handsome kid next door, discovered her body while helping in a search for her. So it's a classic serial killer. He is classic serial killer. It's amazing that he doesn't have more stuff on him, right? These murders are things I'm not proud of, he now says. I hurt my family just as much as everyone. They didn't deserve that. It certainly served to punish me, and justice or otherwise is not going to help with families that I hurt. But prosecutors claim that Smith maintained a cold-blooded indifference when they interviewed him shortly after his arrest. Everyone has got to die sometime, prosecutors quoted Smith as saying during an early parole hearing. If I thought about that, maybe I might feel bad. So I don't think about it. Smith escaped the death penalty because the U.S. Supreme Court moratorium on it at the time. It's a shame, Baker said, because if anyone deserved to be put to death, he did. And he's still kicking and screaming and alive and up for parole in 5 more years. We could see him in 2029. Unbelievable. You can't make it up. This is what we have. Thank you, Richard, for sharing this information. I mean, he's born in 1949. He's got plenty of life in him. Can you even imagine? I just can't. I can't with this insanity. Who writes these laws? We have insane people writing laws. And the idea that they exist even till today because no one can change them. I don't know why. Do I just not know? Do I need to learn? I need a PhD. I guess I'll understand it when I have a PhD. So we saw an Illinois hearing. If you want to see more of these, let me know. as you see, they didn't show up, but we do have Illinois hearings where they do show up. They're just a little different. They're different than what I'm used to, and I got to pick and choose what I do. So if you like something, send me an email or put it in the comment section. And we'll jump to another hearing, or I'll let you go. See how I play this out.
Going downstairs to the basement and followed her. In an unwanted attempt to kiss her, Baudillard resisted, and when she did, Smith grabbed her by the throat and began choking and strangling her until she passed out. Smith then raped her. Smith then tied her pantyhose around her neck, strangling her to death.
Is there anybody here that wants to sit and let him cut your hair with a pair of scissors? You mentioned he wanted to be a barber. Would you be comfortable knowing that he would know that you were a lawyer or somebody that had a good job? Could you sit there and trust him that he wouldn't have anger? I can't imagine anybody wanting to allow him out. I just can't imagine it. I don't know what to say that would impress upon you the fear that I have and other people that knew him and people that didn't even know him. He taught helter skelter, just was he worshiped Manson. And Charles Manson, if he stayed where he should have stayed all of his life, and I hope Drabing stays where he's at now for the rest of his